Okay, so we're back at it again with Spoken Substance. I've got Ian Peskett, who's a project support worker at Studio House, and he's also a stand-up comedian. So, how you doing? You right?
I'm alright.
Brill. So, we're going to bring you on today to shed a little bit of knowledge, which I know that you have a lot of. One thing I want to kind of ask you at first is, where are you from, what do you do, and how long have you been doing stand-up?
So from initially, I grew up around Ashfield. Grew up in Sutton in Ashfield, moved to Kirkby, moved to Mansfield. I ended up coming to Rehab Studio House in Nottingham back in 2013. I've been working there since 2014 as a volunteer. I did a couple of years as a volunteer, slowly gave more responsibility, and then got on the payroll probably 3 years ago now, I think. And stand-up comedy was something that I've only recently been introduced to. I noticed an opportunity for ultra comedy via Facebook, where you do 8 weeks free training and raise money for cancer research, worthy cause. Get the training for free, get to do a night at the Glee Club in Nottingham, which if you're going to be a stand-up, I can't think of any worse stage in this city. And I've been doing it since. I mean, the reason why I started it in the first place was, one, I have an interest in stand-up comedy. I do believe that it's the last honest art form. And I spend a lot of time watching stand-up comics, and I've gained a lot of inspiration, and a lot of my philosophy has been shaped by them. But it was also to challenge my fear. It was that I can't do that, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go, and then I'll know whether or not I can. And so I never saw anything happening after the Glee Club. That was December last year, and then I decided to pitch myself forward for a couple of other little spots here and there. Done a couple of competitions. Won my first one. That was a massive boost of confidence in my abilities at that point. Gave me a bit of a hunger for it. But it's good, you know. I get the opportunity to explore my ideas, share them with other people in a different setting to what I normally do. Get some laughs. Sometimes get paid for it. I mean, I can't think of a worse hobby personally.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you stand-up comedy, and you've had an interesting life, and you make a joke out of it, but it is quite deep and quite serious at some points. It's quite nice to see somebody be quite light-hearted about experiences with it, shape them as a person. But it's a good way to raise awareness as well, and sometimes people are scared to talk about, you know, prison or drugs, and you do it to an audience which might not always talk about that kind of stuff, and it kind of enters them into that world. With the stand-up comedy, did you say you won your first event?
Yeah, so they do what's called gong shows. And you get like up to 5 minutes to impress an audience. They take votes at 3 different points throughout that 5 minutes. If you make it through, you get to a final. And I was lucky enough, because there was a couple of good other acts who made it through to the final. I was lucky to win it that night. I've done a few more. I've got another one in a couple of weeks as well. I really like that format. The next one of them's Derby. I think it's on the 12th of August. Monday the 12th of August.
Brilliant. You should, people, if they're tuning into this, they should go down and watch it. I mean, I watched you near the castle, a pub there. Wasn't expecting it, and the other comics that were on weren't really like you, but you closed the show, you kind of headlined it, and yeah, you had me laughing from the beginning to the end with your realness. Quite a real guy, aren't you?
Well, that's it. I mean, it's like, so you were saying a minute ago about me being willing to talk about the issues that I've been through, and like the formula to my set is tragedy plus time equals comedy, and you see that anyway. I mean, that saying's not just come from nowhere. But that when it comes to my experiences, it's been all about self-acceptance. I've gone through some dark stuff in my past. I ain't gonna lie to you about it. But the fact that I did keep lying about that stuff for so long just justified the existence of that behaviour, which led me back to prison and led me into drugs deeper and deeper. And the thing is the world is being fed misinformation a lot of the time. There's a lot of shame and a lot of stigma attached to addiction and attached to crime. I mean, yeah, crime's wrong, I ain't gonna lie about that, but when it comes down to it, people don't communicate about these things because they're too scared of being judged or isolated, and it's not helpful. It's really not helpful. Like, the more that we get to understand each other, the more chance there is of our success as a species anyway. And so me being willing to stand up there, hopefully give somebody else courage to say, do you know what, I've been there. Do you know what I mean? And then a lot of the problems will start falling away.
Hopefully. So it taps into something you said about 20 minutes ago in terms of freedom, people not being able to feel like they can speak freely about certain topics. Before you was tainted by some of the impurities in the world, before you got into drugs and prison and stuff like that, what was you like? What was your education like? What was it like to live in Sutton and Kirkby and Mansfield areas?
Okay, so I remember a time when I was fearless. I do remember a time when I was fearless. I used to get into fights a lot, and I wouldn't mind climbing up the high things and jumping off the big stuff and all that. And at some point, fear crept in. I was about 8 years old, and I suddenly became scared of everything and everybody. And I carried that fear for quite a long time. And I've tried to search to find what it was that I was scared of, and I ain't quite sure, if I'm honest. But I know that I carried it all through, like tail end of junior school into senior school, and then senior school, the things that shape you then, sex and violence. Yeah, you've got to be good with the girls and you've got to be handy in a fight, and I was scared of both of them things, so I felt like less of a man as a result of that. I allowed myself to get attached to a group of people who I thought were cool. That's how I ended up getting into drugs, because the people I thought were cool were the rebels, and the rebels took drugs. I mean, like, anybody watching this knows that pattern. Every school in the land follows that same pattern, and I had no sense of self. I didn't know who I was, and so I attached myself by extension to this group of people, thinking that I belonged. And that carried for a further 15 years after school, that same mentality. Just fearful and felt different from everybody around me. Nobody understood. I kind of know some of why that is now, which we'll probably talk about as this progresses. But childhood wasn't great. I mean, I wasn't subjected to any real abuse or anything. I was fed and I was clothed and all that other stuff, but I can't remember feeling connected to anybody really. I kind of know the answers to that as well, which we'll probably explore later. Yeah. Then leaving school, I fell into drugs hard. I did. And I ain't gonna lie, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it stopped me caring. The very stuff that had me scared for so long, I stopped caring about.
Removed it?
Yeah. And I was pleased with the result for a short time until the consequences kicked in, because I don't know what you know about drugs, but if you take them too far, they will ravage your soul, and that's pretty much where I was left. I was a broken husk of a man up until like 6 years ago, but I didn't see a way out. So
you tapped into something which, something I think about quite a lot, resonates with me. My daughter, she's 5, and I look at her, and I just think she doesn't understand what fear is. To be scared, like she is careless. She has emotions, she cries and she throws tantrums and she's happy, but she's not been tainted yet. And I think I remember a time myself where I was like that, but what you just said there probably explains a little bit about me as well. There's a point in time where I started to understand fear, and then I became quite scared of everything. And I think that society put it onto young people, don't they? They don't let them be kids for as long as maybe they should be. And do you think that was probably the defining point, maybe, like, I mean, talking a really young age, probably like 8 years old, where that led you to have some insecurities which then manifested over the years?
Massively. And I mean, so it's a big part of being an addict, that is rooted in self, and it's very negative in nature. And a couple of the largest contributing factors to the ongoing addiction are resentment, fear and guilt. They're all interlinked, and they all lead me away from being connected, because that's ultimately where addiction comes from, being disconnected. You can have two people who take the same drug and have the same experience and both enjoy it, and one of them will smash the back out of it and the other will be able to put it down. And generally, if you ever take a close look at their life, you'll see that one has healthy, loving relationships and the other doesn't. I'm generalising a little bit, but that's kind of what it boils down to. And like I said before, I didn't feel connected to anybody or anything while growing up. I was just living in a prison made of fear.
Why do you feel you didn't feel connected to people? Because I think having relationships, human relationships, is a big part of development. Why did you struggle with that?
I don't know quite where my initial insecurities came from, but they were there. That's undeniable, just because of the pattern that I followed, that led to fear, that led to me withdrawing from people, which led to me being dishonest. I pretended to be all things to all people and didn't tell people how I really felt about stuff. I'm just thinking about an incident the other day, and I remember when there was a gang of 13 of us once, and one of them picked a fight on a big lad.
How old was you?
13, 14, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember them all jumping him. And I joined in. And I weren't comfortable about that. I thought it was unfair. It should be one-on-one, toe-to-toe, and take your blows like a man. And if you lose, well, you know, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. But no, that's not what happened that day. And I allowed myself to get carried away with that mob mentality because I didn't want to feel like an outcast.
Right.
Those kind of incidences are few and far between in reality. A lot of like my later teens, up until my 30s, I was kind of alone for a lot of it, separate, mostly out of choice, and then also out of the fact that I was not an attractive prospect to be spending time with, given my life, my lifestyle at the time, in and out of prison and taking heroin for a big portion of it did not lead me to being a nice person. It was very, again, back to being selfish and pretending to be all things to all people, but not actually representing anything wholesome or worthwhile.
Are you honest? You say you're pretending to be all different sorts to different people. Are you being honest with yourself at this moment in time when it's going off?
No. And I mean that is ultimately the best layer of honesty that you can find, and I challenge anybody who'd say that they're fully honest with themselves, because I don't believe anybody can be. It takes a lot of introspection, a lot of self-exploration to be really honest with yourself, because so I'll act according to my belief system, but most of my belief system I'm not responsible for. It got put there by people when I was a kid. Like racism. I'll talk about racism. I was racist growing up. I don't know why. In reality, I had no reason to be. I'd never been injured by a minority. I'd never had anybody attack me or anything like that. But I know I didn't like other cultures. And upon closer inspection, I've realised that, you know, I come from a small mining town and there's a lot of segregation in these little areas. And then because I want to be respected by the elders and they're partaking in that kind of behaviour, I'm going to follow suit. And it shaped my belief system. And it was only when I got to prison that I was able to challenge that idea, that I realised, you know what, some black people are nice and some white people are twats. So, and then I realised that that was what was important to me.
Yeah.
Who means something to me rather than the colour of the skin or whatever, do you know what I mean? And so like, it's only when the belief becomes apparent that I'm in a position to challenge it, and then at that point, then I go through the inner conflict, because like most people, we believe that we are our beliefs.
Did you have to go to prison to learn that then? You had to mix?
I mean, that's how I believe it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I first went to prison at 16. That's like over half my life ago.
Yeah.
But like, if I look at my relationship to all the cultures and stuff, I can kind of see that it shifted from before I went to prison. And that was my first real interaction with other cultures at that point. So it kind of ties in. I could be wrong. I just know that the belief got shattered at some point in time.
You do have to sometimes get exposed to other cultures to open up to them.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, all of this stuff, all of the isms, all the reasons that we choose to distance ourselves from certain groups, they're all born out of ignorance and fear. They don't stand up to any real scrutiny, but we're willing to go along with them. As a race, we're willing to go along with them. It generates some form of competition, and sometimes that can be healthy, but I think generally it's misguided and not beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I think, like you said, competition, but mostly it is misguided. It's unhealthy, really. It really is. And I think sometimes coming from a small mining town where you did and mixing with people who you perceive to be cooler or older can install you with a dangerous mentality. And it's not until you become sound within yourself that you realise you can get your own identity and figure out who you are, and then make better choices, I suppose.
That all falls back again to at least attempting to be honest with myself, and it takes a lot of soul searching. It does, and so like when I was riddled with all that stuff I was talking about a bit earlier on, resentment, fear, and guilt, I'm going to be highly reluctant to look at that stuff. I don't want to accept that I think and feel that way. I'm going to avoid it. I'm going to blame somebody else. It's your fault I feel like this. But by extension, I've completely disempowered myself. If it's your fault I feel like this, now it's your responsibility to stop me feeling like this, and I'm left with my hands bound.
It's like you can never fix yourself.
No, but then at some point I've decided to take responsibility for the resentments that I hold and the people that I hold them against, the things that I feel guilty for, make restitution where necessary and challenge my fears. As a result, I'm sat here talking to you and not in prison.
Yeah, which is a better outcome, hopefully. Yeah. A word that you keep touching on is fear, and I think for a lot of people listening, it's quite a strong word. But you broke it down a couple of minutes earlier before we started, and there's many different words used to describe fear, which kind of take away from the magnitude of what it is. So can you explain that a little bit more?
So I work in a rehab, so fear is something that we work with quite a lot. Fear, the list of fears that I had when I entered rehab, I've probably not got long enough to discuss them. Rejection, abandonment, isolation, being judged, fear of failure, fear of success. I don't know how you manage to get them compatible with each other. Fear of intimacy, how I get that compatible with the fear of isolation, I don't know. Got all this stuff running around in my head, but nothing really concrete to justify any of it. But because I'm scared, like you have two impulses attached to fear, and that's fight or flight. Fight involves a rejection of the thing, and flight involves an avoidance of the thing, and neither of them challenge it. So like when it comes to fear work, when I'm working with other people, when I'm working on myself, the first thing I need to do is find the lie in it, because fear lies. And I remember, so if there's any kids listening, they'll probably identify with this. And I remember so many times when I was a kid, and something had have happened in the playground or whatever, and someone would tell me that somebody was after me, somebody who were going to get me later, or whatever, however you choose to term it nowadays, I don't know. I'm not cool, I'm not down with the lingo and that. But I wouldn't see them that day, and I'd go home and I'd be there that night thinking about it over and over again, like losing sleep over this stuff, running over this scenario when I next meet this guy and he's going to punch me in the face. And I'm scared, I don't want punching it. Who wants punching in the face? And I'm like, well, MMA fighters might, but I'm not down for that. And then I go to school the next day, and I'm tentatively walking into school, and I'm like looking around furtively, and then I don't see him all day. And I'm continually playing that scenario over and over in my head as I'm walking around school, unable to talk to anybody about it because I don't want to be perceived to be a wimp and all that other stuff. And then I get home that night, and then I'm back replaying that scenario over and over in my head again, but this time he's punched me in the face and I fell over, and now everyone's laughing at me on the floor having been punched in the face. And then the next day I don't see him, and then the next night I'm there and he's going to punch me in the face, I'm going to fall over and he's going to kick me in the teeth, blah blah blah, over and over again until I eventually see him, and then none of that happens. None of it. He says, "You're alright," and then we'll go for a smoke down woods or whatever it was that happened. And it's just that most of what I fear is imagined. I make it all up because I've trained myself to view life negatively, and it's only by challenging it, by facing it, I've actually found that there's not that much to really be scared of. There ain't no tigers chasing me down the street. You know what I mean? So this fight or flight response, it's misguided for most of the things that we're scared of now anyway. Yeah. But it's only by communicating about this stuff that we can find resolution, and it's okay to be scared.
It's a bit like saying fear's a manifestation of the brain, like you create it within your mind.
Of course.
Yeah, and fight or flight is useful in life or death situations.
Yeah. We don't get that many. We don't get that many. I mean, like even fear of isolation. I was talking about this just this morning with one of my clients. And it's like, so fear of isolation is very, it had relevance back in the day, because isolation meant death. But it don't now, we've got Tesco. Right, boop, yeah, I'm eating tonight, it's all good. You know what I mean? So even the things that used to be, like, had some founding to it, to justify the fear, they're not even relevant now. Most of the stuff that we're scared of is all down to political issues rather than survival issues, because like I say, there's no tigers chasing us, we ain't got to worry about that stuff. You know what I mean? We've got safety harnesses, so we're not going to fall off, whatever. So it's, a lot of it makes no sense, but I mean, I've heard it explained false evidence appearing real. And then it's either face everything and rise, or get everything and run. So I edited myself out there.
It's like we live in probably the safest times that we've ever lived in, but fear is just as prominent now as probably it's ever been, to be fair.
I mean, in some respects, so if you're talking in terms of health and safety, there is definitely enough legislation to make sure that we don't fall down that big hole, and if we do, it's a £50 fine. But as in regards safer times, because I regard safety as informed and connected. And if we look at the system that we live in, it's the polar opposite. If we look at the governing bodies that we've somehow allowed to get into a position of power, I mean, if we talk overseas, the orange buffoon that is in the White House, I had to really choose my language carefully then, because I do have some very deep opinions about this person. But he's misinforming his populace to get them living in fear. And that's evident. And the last thing that you want from the people that you're giving your life to, because that's essentially what we're doing by allowing these people to rule over us, is to feel fearful. Yeah. We want to feel safe. And most people don't feel safe. That's why there's so much violence out there on the streets, because people are scared. There's all this knife crime stuff. 90% of the people out there carrying a knife will say, well, I'm carrying one because I know the next man's carrying one. Yeah. That's the only justifiable reason that they have for it. And it makes no sense under scrutiny, but I get it if you're a part of that culture.
Yeah, carrying out fear.
And it's like, so then where does safety come into that? And it's, if people actually, I mean, yeah, so drugs comes into it, turf wars, feeling like rats in a trap, because you will see it. I mean, that stuff's not happening in villages. So we've got too much population in too small an area. Again, that's the government's fault. Because you walk around any neighbourhood in any city and you'll see half of the houses are boarded up. Yeah. Apart from the posh ends, that's a different story. But again, that's the elite washing each other's hands and stuff. So, but my safety relies first and foremost on me being realistic with myself, my expectations, my limitations, me choosing the people that I spend time with well, me recognising potential consequences of my actions, me being willing to face up to all that stuff. So on the one hand, I'm living in this environment that could be deemed unsafe if we're to go with my first part of the story, but in reality I'm responsible for my safety and I'm doing all right with it. So if I bring it back to self and I just make sure that this bit's all right, then I'm okay.
Is that how you combat fear?
Yeah, generally. So when I can see the lie in it, it's like most people don't reflect. So I experience fear, it scares me, I avoid it, and I never revisit it until the next time that sequence of events comes up again. And then I remember that old feeling, and I think, oh yeah, I remember, I ran off last time, I'll do that again, because I remember I'm still alive today. Without actually looking at what could potentially happen as a result, or not even looking at how different this scenario is to the last one. Yeah. You know, I challenge the people that I work with to get stuff down on paper, because if you have a fear and you think about the thing that you're scared of, while it's in your mind, you can't make any sense of it and you'll just act off your emotion. And so so if I'm scared of sitting here and giving you this interview, before this interview I'll write down on a piece of paper what I think's going to happen, and then I reflect on it afterwards. Did that happen? No. Did he laugh at me? No. Did he throw his bottle of water at me? No. Did he judge me? No. And so that's the best way that I find to challenge fear, but you can only do that retrospectively. Talking about what I'm scared of to people to gain third-party perspective, that's helpful. Also, then I have to put myself in that thankless position of exposing my vulnerability, which is never nice, because I want to look strong and capable and confident at all times to all people, but in reality that can never happen. So then that's where I'm being realistic about my limitations again. And it's okay to be weak at times, because mostly I'm all right, and I've been able to manage that expectation of self as well.
I think that's really interesting. I think by confronting your fear and then looking back and actually thinking about what happened and how much of it actually came true, I'd say quite a lot of the time the things that you predict are going to happen don't actually happen.
Almost never. Without a shadow of a doubt, almost never. It might come close. That guy who I was thinking about stabbing me in the playground after punching me, pushing me to the floor, kicking me in the teeth, stabbed me on the floor because that was day 4, he might have punched me. And I didn't lose any teeth, no one laughed, we shook hands and walked off. In reality, that was the sequence of events that unfolded, and it's like, okay, so maybe some of my fears founded and some isn't. How do I promote my own safety? How do I manage this stuff? When that comes back to personal risk assessment and all that other stuff. But in reality, fear is a prison. We live between two prisons. Or living between two prisons. Yesterday and tomorrow. yesterday is representative of shame for addicts, for people generally, I suppose. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, I don't have the right to, but I see it a lot. And fear of tomorrow. So then I'll spend all my life beating myself up about what happened yesterday and not even willing to face tomorrow, and it just leaves me disempowered now. And
disempowered is the perfect word. If you're feeling ashamed and you're feeling fearful of the next day, you just stay in the same position. You don't really want to move, do you?
No.
You have to go back and revisit it, and then confront the future and realise it's probably not going to happen to you.
No, you can't see a way out though when you're in it, sadly. And then the reluctance to share that stuff stops you being able to get out of it. Because it was only when I started sharing it with other people, started talking about it. And the most powerful words I've ever heard in my life were "me too." And I started speaking about some of this stuff that weighed so heavy on my heart, and I just stared yeah, me and all. Like, really? So I'm not alone? Because that's what I thought, that's what I suspected.
Is that isolation that you're talking about?
In reality, so if I fall back to that and I say that I was isolated and separate, I'd done that to myself. Nobody ever told me that I wasn't worthy of spending time with, that I wasn't loved, that I wasn't appreciated, that they didn't care about me. Nobody ever told me that stuff. But that was the idea I was left with. A few little events in my past had led me to believe that about myself, that I'd never amount to anything, and so drugs was very easy for me to fall into. It answered all my questions at the time, but it turned out I was asking the wrong questions.
How old was you when you first experienced your first ever drug? How did that come about for you?
So, I mean, that was me attempting to connect with a group of the older boys. My stepbrother was 1 year older than me. I'll call him Jack the lad, because his name was Jack and he lived up to the reputation suggested. He was admired by all, even the older lads. He was cool. Girls loved him. And I always felt awkward and clunky, little. And I wasn't little, but I felt it. And I saw that he was engaging in this stuff and having a laugh and getting applause for his attempts and all this other stuff, just smoking cannabis buckets around that flat. I thought, yeah, I'll have a go at that then, maybe I'll be cool too. I don't remember actually saying those words to myself, but I know that's the principle I was trying to capture. I wanted to be accepted, I wanted to be part of, I wanted to be liked, admired, respected and all this other stuff. And I thought that was the way to do it. I mean, I told you before this interview that my addiction wasn't born out of some poor morality. It led to a poor morality, in reality, we'll come to that later. But it was born out of miseducation. I wasn't informed about who I was, about how to be in life and how to gain the things that I wanted. And so I just followed the group of people that I'd spent time with. You lie with dogs, you get fleas.
Yeah.
And that's I'm not saying that they were bad people, because at that time, that group of people, they weren't. And as far as I'm aware, most of them are kind of doing all right and are nice people today. Later on, I met some less savoury characters, engaged in similar behaviours as them. But at the time, it was nice. It turned my give a shit switch off. I felt connected. I liked the buzz. I liked the feeling that it washed over me. It was something that generated excitement. I had something to live for. Because outside of that, so I mean, like at home, I didn't feel connected to my mum. So I mean, I know I mentioned to you before that I had blamed her for the results of my life up until I entered rehab, until I started taking responsibility for my actions and where I'd ended up and stuff. But I never really felt connected to my mum through growing up, and so at home I was lonely. Well, I don't like saying that word, but I was. I felt lonely. And then like the school bored me. I wasn't interested. I couldn't see the relationship between what I was doing at school and life. Yeah. Not that I knew anything about life at that time, but I do know that if you want to educate anybody, you have to make it relatable. And it wasn't. Like, I have never used a quadratic equation since writing them in class, and so then why did I need to do it? And being all questions like I am and being rebellious as I am, I decided to reject it. So I did the bare minimum that I had to scrape through school, but it was I attended because I was told to rather than I wanted to be there. And then leaving school and going home and getting changed and going down into the woods and smoking cannabis all night was my release. I don't think that's an unfamiliar story to many people. Like, the result might be different, whether they were smoking cannabis in the woods or not. You've still got your go-to, and you've still got what you regard as your haven, and we need that.
I speak to many young people who probably will tune in and watch this, and that story is familiar with a lot of them. And what I kind of get from that story is you don't really understand yourself when you're young, and nobody's teaching you how to understand yourself. So therefore, you make poor choices to try and grasp different aspects of your character that you want to bring out. Peer pressure is a big one. Obviously, looking up to your older brother and the older lads. What could schools do to make sure that young people are understanding themselves better and they're engaging more with stuff that's relative to them?
So in regard to schooling, it's this is where I end up going on one big rant about the system and railing against it and getting us all to go down to Downing Street with pickets. The thing is, and these are only my beliefs, and I hope that nobody thinks that my word carries that much weight. That's my little waiver. The fact is, schools are indoctrination centres. Repetition is applauded, creativism is stifled. People aren't allowed to explore themselves in that environment, not fully. They're introduced to certain concepts rather than actually saying, well, are you interested in this, and is this something you're any good at? And if so, explore the hell out of it, mate, because then that's your niche. Because passion is something that is stifled, and passion is one of the biggest things that keeps me clean. Passion is the biggest thing that wakes me up, gets me up every morning ready, bright and ready to face the day. It gives me purpose, it gives me drive. And without it, I felt dead. I never had passion before. Having a purpose to get out of bed and going to school and doing quadratic equations was never going to do that for me. But going down the woods smoking buckets did. And I'm not saying that it's the best way to tackle situations, but my education at that time led me to believe that that was a good thing to do. And to be fair, I enjoyed it for a very long time, until it started playing havoc with my mental health, because I outdid it a little bit. But it's... And I get that schools are underfunded and there's not enough teachers per child or whatever, and I can appreciate that. So it's difficult to be able to make everybody's classroom experience different. But they should concentrate their effort on that, or at least attempt to.
The excuse is getting a little bit boring, ain't it?
Yeah, but it's, like I say, I mean, if we have a proper little close look at the system itself, it just wants obedient workers. Yeah. And so any rebelliousness is stifled with fear tactics, rather than being taught about cause and effect. Like growing up, it was always, you will do this or else, and it's like, no. Like they didn't ask me why I wanted to do it. They didn't ask me why I'd rather be smoking down, and I probably wouldn't have been able to generate an answer. You know, I don't know, because I enjoy it. Would have been enough of an answer to satisfy my own curiosity about that stuff at the time, but in reality, I'd maybe more counselling for kids, more support in regard to, like, what do you really want? Not what he wants, what do you want? Let's look at how we can get you there. Have them being able to validate themselves, because I had to validate myself by extension. I was only any good. I could only qualify my place on this planet by how much of a service I was to everybody else, which is why I pretended to be all things to all people. And left alone, I didn't feel like I deserved to be here. And I know that most people on the planet have a similar feeling. And if they don't challenge that feeling, then it ends up either making them too introverted, isolated, separate, probably suicidal, or it sends them the other way and turns them psychopathic and vengeful. And neither of them are going to lead them to feel connected or loved or celebrated for their very relevant placement on this planet, because we wouldn't be here if we didn't have a place.
One of the things you said is asking the young people, what is it that you want to do? And in my job, I ask people, what do they want to do? And they don't know. And when I was younger, I didn't know. But I needed somebody to show me.
And do you know what? I didn't know. I didn't know. Because I didn't believe. But I remember before I didn't know, I wanted to be a private eye. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an architect. But those dreams got crushed somewhere along the line. And it's like, well, if I can't do that, then what's the point? And I can't see when all that got challenged or when all that shifted, but I know it did. I had big dreams as a kid until fear and doubt crept in. And the fear and the doubt get harvested and exaggerated, not directly, but they do by the schooling system.
When
Because
when I was younger, for a long time, I wanted to be a wrestler. Yeah. And I can't tell you the point when I started to realise that wasn't going to happen. But it's that creative flair, it kind of gets squashed. Don't be silly, you can't do something like that. And maybe I couldn't do something like that, but people don't actually say them words to me, but I mean, the system kind of zaps it out of you. That you don't believe, sometimes you don't believe you can do things anymore or achieve things.
Well, it gives you the one avenue. It gives you the curriculum. The schooling system gives you the curriculum, and these are the things that you must do to display your aptitude in life. But the curriculum is not representative of life. I was never taught about taxes. I was never taught about domestic chores. I was never taught about healthy relationships. I wasn't taught about the stuff that's become really important since I left school.
Yeah.
And so then that there is no one size fits all then, just by extension. But the thing is if you fail at that, then the school, they might not call you out. I mean, they used to stick dunce caps on you and put you in a corner and call you stupid. I don't know whether they do that kind of stuff anymore, but it's like, well, if you're shamed for not being able to do their little bit of knowledge, then you're going to lose all interest in any knowledge anyway.
Yeah.
Just by extension, it's like, oh, well, I can't do it then. Like, they told me. That's bollocks. But
find a lot of people in prison who are really smart, just don't think they're able to do stuff, and when they get in there and they've got nothing else to do and people start believing them, saying, look, you can do this course, you could do this, and they actually get a lust for learning and education in whatever shape or form it is, or the topic that they're learning about. But if you can't live up to the expectations of getting them 5 GCSEs, and sometimes you're in the lower sets all the time, you can only stick with it for so long before you go, this isn't really for me. Disheartened. You lose trust and you lose belief.
Then there's also the onus on the teachers finding a style of learning that can suit everyone. I mean, it's like when I'm at work, I'm fairly flexible, I'm fairly approachable. I use self-disclosure quite a lot, which helps disarm people, lets them know that they're safe to talk about their issues, and I talk about things that I've been shameful for and how I've resolved it and all that other stuff that helps them feel safe and cared for when I'm doing stuff with them. But I know that not all of my approaches reach all people, and so I have to be receptive to the possibility that I might need to speak differently to this one. Yeah. And then I involve them in that. I mean, like after every one-to-one session, I give them a sheet of paper to make me accountable to them as they're accountable to me. So then we feel like equals, because that is something that doesn't happen. Like, people don't feel like equals.
You don't mark the teacher on her work as a student. No. It's just you didn't obviously get what she was teaching. Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like everybody just wants to call the kids stupid or med them up for ADHD, which I believe is bollocks, personally. I do. It's like, oh, so the kid's not interested in quadratic equations. What a surprise. What, so he's messing about instead? Oh no. What would you rather be doing? In the woods digging a hole with a stick? Of course you do, you're 7. Right. Why is it a surprise? What, you want to med them up and pacify them?
It wasn't such a big thing, was it, back in the day?
Not as I remember. And they'll argue with that, saying more research has been done, but I don't know. I have my own suspicions about that, which I won't get into here.
Yeah, that's a huge topic, to be fair. In terms of, you started smoking weed, how long did it take you before you hit any hard substances?
So I was smoking weed about, I can't remember, I was 10 or 11. It was summer holidays before big school.
Quite early.
So I was 11. Also took acid in that same summer.
Yeah.
It was about 4 years later when I tried amphetamine for the first time, and then a year after that. So I'm going to tell you a couple of connected stories now, I think. Yeah. So in November 1997, I committed a burglary, a house burglary, which I ended up getting arrested for. And then I got a load of non-custodial orders for a sentence, because I was only, nearly 16 by the time I got sentenced. And I breached them all because I didn't care, because I'd rather be down the woods smoking buckets instead of doing community service or whatever it was that they gave me. And I ended up on bail, committed a load of further offences, trying to get money to get more cannabis. And when it came to, I ended up getting 2 months in prison. Scared the shit out of me, that did.
Could you have avoided that by going to community service?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Wow.
if I'd complied with the orders,
Yeah.
if I'd jumped through the hoops that they presented at me, I could have avoided prison. And I'm not advocating prison. However, I learned more in prison than I did in school about life, people, the streets. Do you know what I mean? You see the darker side of humanity, and it educates you rapidly. I'm not recommending it for anybody.
Stops you being naive.
A little bit, yeah, I was very naive. Well, during that sentence, pretty much all of my friends at that time, there was a big influx of heroin into Sutton in Ashfield in 1998, which was when I went to prison. And I got out and all of my friends were on it at that point. I remember the day I got out, my best mate bumped into him in town. He says, "Are you coming for a dig of smoke?" No, I've never had it, so no, I'm going for a smoke. And then I went round to his one day. It was a Saturday. And we always used to have a £5 each, go and buy like a team for hash and 10 fags and go outwards every Saturday without fail. And he decided he was buying heroin that day. Me being selfish, well, I'm not going to buy a £5 of it, split it with you while you have one of them, get me one of them. And I think about that day as well, and it's like, it was horrible. So I injected it first time I took it. Very dangerous in reality, could have died.
Yeah.
But I never thought about those potential consequences. It won't happen to me. It's talking about that before. Yeah. And so then I had it, and I kind of went blind, deaf, throwing up all the time. But I don't know. There must have been something comforting about it, because I went back again and again and again for like 10 years. I mean, that was the most problematic substance I've dealt with. It got me.
Do you know what shocks me the most about that? Is the first time you took it, you had a bad encounter with it. And I think for people listening out there, like, you threw up, you was going blind. Most people would think, why would you do it again?
Exactly. Yeah, and it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't. Like, looking back at it now, from where I am, it makes no sense to me. And my relationship with heroin today is very different to what it was for that 10 years.
Yeah.
And I just, it must, because people talk about it, you being in a bubble. That's how I feel when you're on it, or wrapped in cotton wool, or I can't remember experiencing it like that, but I just know that it must have provided comfort.
Yeah.
It must have provided safety and freedom, or I would have never took it again. To the detriment of pretty much all aspects of my life as well, because I don't do half measures.
No. You said that a lot of your drug taking resulted in feeling free.
Yeah, I mean that's the illusion. That's the illusion that I was actively chasing. I think there's the freedom of choice that precedes the using the drug, and then the disinhibiting effect of most drugs. I mean, like when you're drunk, you don't give a shit, like anything.
Yeah.
You're untouchable, you're fearless, misguided, but you can't see that until you wake up in the cells with blood on your shirt. But yeah, and that's all I was ever looking for, because I didn't feel free. I didn't feel at liberty to make my own choices. And I know that there's a big part of that was I couldn't make my own choices because I didn't want to suffer consequences. I wasn't allowed to make choices because Mum said, or because it was against the law, or whatever it was that I wanted to do at the time. I mean, there's many incidences where that crops up in my history. But like on looking back at my life, it was freedom that I was looking for.
Yeah. Lowers them inhibitions so you can get on with life.
I mean, it didn't give it to me. What heroin does to you is it pretty much turns off, well, it slows down, because it's an analgesic with depressant qualities. What that means is it's a painkiller, but it also slows down your central nervous system. So that's what it did. With it being a painkiller, in essence, any stuff that I don't like feeling becomes numb as a result. And sadly, it also numbs down those other feelings of fear and guilt and stuff, which makes it easier to commit behaviour that for me landed me in prison and broke most of my relationships.
Does it remove that consequence, or that fear of consequence?
I think, I mean, most of my using heroin was basically 10 years of me running around desperately trying to get another tenner. Yeah. That was it. 10 years. I need another tenner, just like that. And so I wasn't looking as far ahead as what would happen after that tenner. I just wanted that fix. And then as soon as I had it, big wave of shame, guilt for whatever stupid stuff that I'd done to get it. And then those feelings would only go away with another fix. So it's just round and round and round. It's painful.
Trying to numb them feelings.
Yeah. And like we do this course at work called ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, and that talks about, in one of the sessions, about not wants and fixes. And a not want is a thought, feeling or physical sensation that I'd rather be without. Right. And a fix it is a coping strategy that I use to be able to take that away from myself. And generally it's an unhealthy cycle of behaviour because the fix-its generate more not wants. So if I'm rattling for a fix and I go out and I rob a tenner to go and score another bag, then off the back of that bag I've now got guilt, which is another not want, which I then need to fix, and my answer at that point was heroin. Go round and round in circles. And being able to, it just falls back to being able to accept however you are, wherever you are, whenever you are, regardless of circumstance. That's the aim.
It's acceptance of yourself.
Yeah. And whatever feelings you're having, because like how I've related it is, so I was unwilling to feel guilt, fear, shame, pain, abandonment, isolation, grief. I did not want any of them things. I just wanted to feel good all the time. And so if I'm actively avoiding half of those actual human experiences, because that's all they are, the genuine human experiences, all part of the whole spectrum of humanity. If I'm avoiding them, then surely by extension I'm becoming subhuman. And well, if you looked at me like 15 years ago when I was bang at it, I was pretty subhuman. Kind of like my physicality kind of betrayed my emotional state. Yeah. You said you was always chasing that tenner. When you get addicted to a kind of drug like that, what kind of stuff does it lead you to do? Where does it take you? Well, I mean, I was selling for quite a lot of it because it's easier, because you've already got the very thing that you want the tenner for anyway. So it's cost effective, it makes sense. I mean, I used to shoplift a lot. I was never very imaginative when it came to making money, if I'm honest. I mean, I had one mate who he could pull money out of thin air. I just didn't know how he did it. He could just fall out of bed into 300 quid or whatever, but I wasn't one of those types. So I'd go shoplifting infrequently or frequently in spells, whatever. But I knew every time I went out, I was running the risk of getting caught, because every incident you can get caught for on the premises at the time. And that was not overly scary, but it was also a consequence I didn't want to run the risk of facing. And I used to borrow a lot of money off my grandmother. I ended up so the guy who I ended up having heroin with the first time, a few months after that incident, we both got caught injecting in the public toilets in Sutton in Ashfield. And I could not face that consequence from my mum. Couldn't. When she didn't come in to be my appropriate adult, because I was only 16 at the time, and I thought, I'm not going home. And I went and pretty much plumped myself on my grandmother for the next, 10 years or whatever. And very often I would borrow money off her with the intention at least to pay her back. But if you've got money in your pocket, it's going to your dealers. That's as simple as it was for me, sadly. And I knew every time I did that, I was straining that relationship further, running the risk of her kicking me out and rejecting me or whatever. So I started selling, because I knew that it was going to take the police at least, 4 or 5 months to be able to build up a case before they can kick my door off. Right. So I've got breathing room.
But did you come for you?
Oh yeah. Well, I got 3 years in 2001 for it. Well, sentenced in 02, arrested in 01, week after the Twin Towers. That was funny. I was laughing all the way to the police station. You've got nothing on me. Then I get in the cells and they get in the interview room, they put the paperwork in front of me. I'm like, damn, you got me. Okay then, pleaded guilty.
A lot of young people out there, and a lot of people feel that they've got more intelligence than the police, or to be able to outsmart them. Do you believe that the police are such a big force, they're always going to catch you at some point in time?
It's debatable. I mean, like the thing is, so like with real criminals, not your petty 2-bit hoodlums or whatever, real criminals, there's an arms race. It doesn't matter what intervention or technology the police bring out, it will be intercepted and compensated for by the organised crimes, because that's just how it is. We'll find loopholes. I say we, like I'm not a gangster or anything. I'm just saying, like, people in general will find loopholes around systems if they want to. I think some people can get lucky and avoid the consequences for a time, but then also with that comes complacency. And so it's like when I started selling drugs, I'd make sure that people always rang me on a burner phone. I'd go out, I'd say meet me in 10 minutes at a designated spot. I wouldn't leave gangs of them like a lot of dealers do because they're lazy. I'd go out, each individual one, I'd go out, be there 5 minutes before they're turning up so I can look around, you know what I mean? I'd keep the stuff tucked away in a place, something that wasn't readily findable by the police. And then when I wasn't getting caught, it was like, yeah, well, just meet me at my back fence. It was still secreted on my person, only take out what I need just to do a changeover so I can get it passed for a possession charge, and I'm just walking around with it in my pocket.
Yeah.
And it's that complacency. Complacency will kill us all in one form or another.
You get confident, don't you? Yeah. You do, you get confident the more you do it.
More than confident, because it's not justified. But it's because we just work off our experiences.
When you went to prison in 2001, how was that for you? Was that the longest stint you did? Did you learn a lot in prison?
I did. I didn't learn how to stop taking heroin.
Is it the using in there just as prolific as out on the streets?
It is. It wasn't for me. So, when having looked at my behaviour and engagement with the world over the last 30 odd years, I've seen that one of my biggest fears was responsibility, being responsible, taking responsibility. And so when I'm out here and there's expectations of society or family or whatever on me, I buckle. What I did, buckled under that pressure, and my answer was to keep using. When I'm in prison, I'm told what to do, I'm told where to go, I'm put in a little box and kept there till it's feeding time. I've not got to cook for myself, I've only got to clean like 3 square feet of area a day. Yeah. So there's nothing for me to be scared of. After the first sentence, when I realised I wasn't going to get sexually attacked in the showers, I wasn't scared in prison, and so I didn't need to use. The minute I get out, straight to the beer off, pretty much every time, or dealers or both. Yeah, so as soon as I'm faced with life again.
Do you feel with freedom comes fear? Because in prison you got your freedom restricted and your choices restricted, so there's a routine for you to follow, so you kind of know how it's going to go, so you're not fearful. But with the freedom of choice outside in the real world, sometimes you don't know how it's going to pan out. Is that where your fears come into play?
I think that probably relates directly to my experiences. I don't think that's universal. So fear is very subjective, and it's all down to the individual. Same as hope, same as freedom. And like how I relate that, it's like two people can go through the exact same conditions. You know, you could do it like laboratory tested sequence of events that plays out, and they'll come out different people. And it's like, well, if all the other measures were the same, then what's different? And it's the individual's relationship to it. And so if one's, to the thing itself, it's like how I perceive it, how I approach it, because reality is not real. Reality is just an agreed upon scenario. What you deem real might be different for me, and then when we talk, we find what our reality is. Yeah. And that's what we're.
Sometimes I relate experience to a feeling, and then feelings are emotions, but you might not be feeling the same emotions as me about the same experience, and that's how you perceive the experience to be, and it obviously then changes your perception of the world. Yeah. With prison, you found it, I don't want to say comforting, that's the wrong word, but it wasn't as bad for you as maybe for others. Did you see other people in prison suffering? Yeah.
Not quite sure why. I'm not quite sure why I didn't get a hard time through school. I'm not quite sure why I didn't get a hard time through prison, because I wasn't violent. Very few occasions. I mean, like, I've served 4.5 years behind doors in prison and only had physical altercations twice.
Were they bad or were they manageable?
Just a couple of little exchange blows before the officers intervened. I don't know. I don't want to sound egotistical. I think I'm cheeky and charming enough to avoid a slap.
Your communication and your social skills, you've worked on enough to be able to get yourself out of tricky
I can
situations.
talk myself out of as many fights as I talk myself into, I don't know. Some people get it hard in there because they'll be trying to run a drug habit, which is near impossible unless you're having it brought in yourself. But then if you're having it brought in yourself, you're running the risk of being attacked by other people who want your stuff, whatever. And I didn't involve myself in them politics, so that pressure wasn't there.
I think in terms of your communication and social skills, something that's not taught in schools enough is how to be charming, how to be a people person, how to pitch your conversation to people who have a different audience. And that's something you probably have mastered over the years. Well, not mastered, but you've got better at it. In terms of doing your comedy, you pitch your jokes to different audiences to get.
Yeah, I mean, that falls more back to work for me. I mean, so like I'm working in a health and social care environment. As a result, I've had to do health and social care qualifications, and part of that is person-centred approaches. Yeah. And that involves more listening than talking. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I never listened to anybody, ever, before I got clean. Really? I heard every word that everybody said, because I'm nosy and I don't want to miss out. But I didn't actually listen, take it on board, reflect on what people had said. I just rejected it unless it fit in with my narrow worldview, and that's what most people do. I think the best way to be a good communicator is to listen to the other party, because you already know what you're going to say. Everything that's just about to fall out of your mouth, you already know, so you're not learning while you're talking. Yeah.
It's about listening to other people and seeing how it relates to you.
But then, sadly, we fall into the because it's really difficult to listen without judgment. Yeah. And if you're judging, all you're doing is bringing your own experience back into it. And so like I follow a 12-step theatre of recovery, and like the second step is just about open-mindedness. And that's about me being willing to accept the possibility that you might know something that I don't. And that's all I need to do at that point. And I never did that. If whatever information anybody else held conflicted with my beliefs, it's getting rejected. I don't want to know. I'm not interested. Yeah. Which wasn't helpful for me. Because the stuff, when I thought I knew everything, when I was out there on the street, living like a rebel without a clue, the information that I held that was actually valuable to me in my life, I couldn't fill the back of a postage stamp with it in a size 14 font.
And it's not until you have that open-minded approach to actually accessing information without judging it and then bringing your experience into it, that you can actually start to take on stuff which can actually change your life.
Right, so I mean, part of that for me, I believe, is I had a very low sense of self. Didn't know who I was. I remember, I'll go back to prison briefly, here in this story. I'll be on these back to work courses, and inevitably there's a bit where I ask you what qualities, skills or traits you have, and I'd sit there staring at a blank piece of paper. I didn't know. I didn't know what good stuff that I held. And that's because most of my assets, traits or whatever I was using negatively. So I can be diligent, I can be determined, I can be strong, capable, focused, dedicated, responsible, reliable and all these other things, but I utilise those traits to feed my addiction rather than to further my place and help people. Do you know what I mean?
You had a lot of transferable skills there.
Yeah, and that's it. And I couldn't see the relationship, and so as a result, then I'm left at a point where, well, whatever I've got is mine, and you can't touch it. Rather than opening up and talking about this stuff. Yeah. And so I'm okay having weak moments, and I'm okay sharing my vulnerabilities and my insecurities now, because I know generally I'm secure and I'm strong. Yeah. And I'm okay accepting that I don't have to be strong and secure all the time.
And you allow that to happen. Yeah.
And I think that is something that schools could work with. And the difficulty is like in the playground, everybody's being picked on because they're different. And so you're being forced to conform. I hate that.
Hate that. That's something you couldn't live with, yeah.
It goes against the creativity I was speaking about previously.
You still hate it today as well?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't affect me personally. Yeah. It's very rare. And I say very rare, it's been over 6 years since I've been actively targeted for my appearance or judged or attacked or, You know, like the circles that I move in now, everybody's loving, caring, compassionate, helpful, friendly, accepting, and that's as an extension of that. That's what I've become, and now that's what I attract. What you put out in the world is what you get.
Rubbing shoulders with the right people.
Yeah, so like learning how to make healthy relationship choices was definitely something that I worked on while I was in rehab, and that I've carried on since. And that all falls back to probably 3 key elements: trust, love, and respect. And before I went to rehab, I had none of those 3 things for myself, so I was never going to get them from anywhere else and never have them for anything else. And we talk about it being an inside job. Well, I'll fall back into the blame stuff we were discussing earlier. It's like, well, it's your fault I feel like this. No, take some responsibility for how you feel. And now you're in a position to be able to change it and make things better for yourself. It's pretty much the pattern I've followed.
I think there'll be people out there who'll say, you know, but people might have been out there who have been abused or racially attacked, or they've had some kind of, you know, injustice performed in their life, and sometimes blame's justified, but you don't take control when you're blaming other people.
No, and that's it. I mean, control is something that we could talk about for hours.
Yeah.
And control's not always a good thing. With blame comes no responsibility.
Yeah.
And yes, you may have been attacked. I mean, we were discussing it earlier, and so it falls back into resentment. So this person attacked me for my circumstances, and maybe it happened a couple of times, and it's horrific. It's horrific that this stuff is still happening. It's horrific that, I mean, like, look overseas again, and these Tiki Torch marches and the KKK and all that stuff. They've got absolutely no right to be speaking the stuff they are. However, they are speaking it, and so then people are confusing acceptance with tolerance, and it's like, okay, they are that way, and I can accept that, but I don't have to tolerate it.
Yeah.
And then I move myself back to, well, how can I promote my own safety in these circumstances, and how can I take responsibility for the feelings they left me with? Because not everybody who's been called a racial slur has responded the same. Some will be able to walk away from it, some of it are going to take it on. So then it's like, well, why do you want to take that on? Is that part of what defines you? Do you allow that to define you? How do you define you? Let's move back into that, because I've got power again then.
Yeah.
It's up to me how I define myself, by what traits, what measures and what actions is what I choose to define me. Doesn't matter what anybody else says. Now, if they're physically attacking me, that's something else, and obviously then it's a criminal matter, and yeah, call the police.
Yeah.
Don't hide from that stuff, do you know what I mean? Because I'm never going to say to a camera, get round there with bats and firebombs. But there's a way of being able to defend yourself healthily.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do that, seek support.
It's that empowerment of you choosing what defines you. Yeah. And one thing that I get from speaking to you is you've studied yourself for so long. You must have. You've got a really deep understanding of yourself. And I think that's quite a common theme where people get life wrong sometimes because they don't understand who they are. And then they make poor choices because they're not really informed of who they are. And you said that the work you do now, Studio House, you promote choice. Yeah. You promote choice. Is that a big part of helping people recover? You allow them to have that choice to recover?
Definitely. So it's, like I said before, it's about education. And the difficulty we have is, so underpinning my addiction, I had a low sense of self-esteem brought about by a series of events that I committed before I even picked up drugs, leaving me to a position where I had no value in self, and the only answer was drugs, leading me further into disconnection, which justified the existence of it. So initially I've got to get honest about some of that, if not all of it. And so the sequence of events that initially led to this shame, I'm going to speak about that stuff, about how I felt separate, isolated, lonely, uncared for as a child, and I've got to cry for that little boy because I never allowed him to when I was the little boy. And that's uncomfortable, and it creates vulnerability and fear and all that other stuff. But you know what, if I'm in this, I'm going to fix myself, and this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to delve the depths of my soul, and I'm going to face the stuff that I find there, because nobody's doing that stuff. I'm sure I had a point.
It's like a dark place that you can only drag yourself to.
Well, no, I mean, it's like I needed to be encouraged. I needed to have my hand held for a lot of that stuff. I mean, so like if I talk about my recovery for a minute, I personally believe that I had to go to rehab. I'd had interventions done on me in the past by certain people whose words I didn't believe, teachers, mum, police, systems, whatever. And it was only when another addict spoke to me and I could tell that they'd been where I'd been. That Me Too stuff was so powerful. Do you know what I mean? It was like, wow, maybe me too then. And that gave me the courage to at least start the stuff. And I did it with reservation. I had the reservations of all the fears and the doubts, and maybe I'm different to all this lot and all that. But the more I tried it, the more comfortable I felt doing it again. And I dug a little deeper. And then so this level of introspection that you see in me today has come by extension of me working with other people. Because me working through my own issues, I'm subjective to it all because I was a part of it. So in reality, I'm blinkered to what actually happened. But by seeing similar experiences in other people, I'm able to view it a bit more objectively. And that's what I went through. That makes sense to me. And that's when I say me too to them. And that's what happened. But while nobody's communicating about where they've really been and they all want to pretend, falling off his chair now. While they all want to pretend that they're the big dog or whatever it is that they're doing. Sure. Yeah. And it's like, it's okay to be tough, but you can't pretend to be tough all the time.
And I hope there's people out there listening who you just connect with via doing this talk. And yeah, I feel like that. And like you're saying, it's not until you went to a place where somebody was telling you how you felt from their own experience did you realise that actually that is who I am, or that's an experience that I've had, or that's a mindset that I've created. And sometimes I think the most important people to go in there and work with people who are vulnerable or going through problems are the people who have had the same experiences with them. It's not top level academics, I'm not discrediting them, but it's people who have walked the path where these people are walking.
There's a lot in language and approach, I think. Another theatre that I've been trained in is transaction analysis. And there's certain words that are deemed critical parent words, and I hate them. And every time I hear people, need to, got to, have to, should, must. You have them rattling around in your head every day. Right. I need to do that, or I've got to do this, I have to. No, you don't. You don't have to do anything. The only things that you need to do are take in food, let out food, sounds better if I word it that way, sleep and breathe. Your autonomic responses deal with most of that itself. And everything outside of that is choice. Everything. Yes. But then I know for a fact that you will have at some point in your life been told many times about one specific event, you need to do this, and you've rejected it. You've not done it. Because you felt like you've had no choice.
That's a trigger word.
Yeah, and so it invokes the rebel, because we've all got a rebel in us. And then, by extension as well, if you tell yourself that you need to do something, and then you do the thing, there's no credit to be had, because it needed to be done. Rather than doing the thing and then going, do you know what, I didn't have to do that, but I did, check me out. Yeah. And then you give yourself a nice little positive stroke.
So do you avoid using these words when you're like working with people who are trying to rehabilitate their life?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's something that I've kind of pieced together over the last few years, and I try and bring it into the work that I do with the residents, which makes it easier for me to be conscious of my own language when I'm talking to myself. Yeah. Because I've used these words for years myself.
Do you think teachers could take that on board?
I think it can hurt. I mean, the thing is the system's built on do as I say, not as I do. Little children should be seen and not heard, and all this other stuff. And it's like, just promote free choice, but just make it clear to whoever it is that you're working with what the consequences could be. Yeah. It's like, you can do whatever you want. That's what I say to people. Like when people at work, they're talking about, I want to use, or I want to leave, or whatever it is that they're talking about, and like whether I agree with their decision or not, I'm like, do what you want, just let me know how you get on. Yeah. And I say it tongue in cheek, and then I'm laughing about it, and it tends to help move them through that idea. Yeah. But seriously, do what you want. You're allowed to.
And you mean it when you say it.
Yeah. We're all allowed to do what we want.
And ultimately, like, you, in a school, if you smack somebody or bring a knife in, then there's going to be a consequence.
And that's the thing, it's like, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to punch somebody in the face. Yeah. If I wasn't allowed to, I wouldn't be capable of. I am capable of punching somebody in the face. I choose not to because I don't want to get either into a deeper fight, end up injured myself. I don't actually want to hurt anybody. I don't want to end up, you know what I mean? And so, because I moved through life, I didn't know about cause and effect, and I speak about this a lot at work as well. It's like I used to fall out of prison after a drunken escapade, end up on the park, getting drunk, bragging about I'd fell out of prison off another drunken escapade. It's like, well, if I could really see the connection between those events, I wouldn't be stood there with a bottle in my pocket.
Yeah. But you couldn't see the connection.
And I went to rehab, and they have this thing called the consequence system, and it helped me see that, okay, my actions have a response, that something happens immediately after. I started to see that, because my life was just a bunch of separate events until I got to rehab, and then I realised that they were all connected via the timeline of my interactions. It's physics 101, isn't it?
Yeah.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yeah,
What goes up must come down. Yeah.
The in terms of language used, when you said need to, must do, I think that kind of sparked something in me. Being a youth, when people used to say that, I just want to do the complete opposite. You're rebellious, aren't you, when you're young? But if somebody had put it across to me like it was my choice, kind of empowered me, then maybe I would have just that feel when the sentence is said, that kind of feeling, it resonates inside your body. Maybe it would have been a more receiving feeling rather than a...
I believe it would. That's why I concentrate so much attention on it. So, okay, you don't need to do it. Let's invoke desire. What do you desire? What do you want?
Yeah.
Let's look at that stuff. And then beyond that, let's look at your motives for what it is that you want.
Yeah.
It's like, why is it that you want that? Like this morning, talking to somebody who wants to leave, he wants to drink. I'm like, okay, well, why is it that you want that? It's like, where were you going to go, for one? Because I knew that you were going to be homeless. I knew that if he drank, it would mean chaos and probably death for him. He knew this in reality, which is why he hadn't left. But let's have a closer look at all of the stuff surrounding this idea. Why is it you want to leave?
The choice and the consequence.
Running from fear.
Yeah.
That's exactly what was happening with this guy this morning. And well, thankfully, I've kind of managed to talk him down off the parapets a little bit.
And it's people like you that really do make a difference.
So I know I've definitely had for a few people. I've had feedback. I generally get good feedback from my work. I mean, it's very rare that I get told I'm full of shit.
I don't mean that's why you do the work that you do. But sometimes you don't always know if you're going to get results when you start the journey. But all you can do is offer that service.
So I remember the first one-to-one client I had. I think it was January 15. I took him on. A really, really good working relationship with this guy. Really connected with him. Got him to open up about stuff that he would never have told anybody. Was able to hold him in that energy and see the spark come alive in his eyes, because that's what I look for. I love it when that flicker of recognition goes off.
Can you physically see it?
Yeah, definitely. Was it this? DBTE, dead behind the eyes. There's a lot of that, and a lot of them come to us like that. It's like the soul's been extinguished. And then slowly over time we start introducing them to the concepts, and you watch them work with it and waking up, and it's beautiful to witness. But then this guy ended up contacting an ex-partner, which didn't go well, ended up in a fight, decided we were going to drink again, and I really took that personally. For a good couple of months I did, well, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? But when I bring it back to me again, and I look at my interactions in life, and I'm like, my mum did everything she could to stop me taking smack, as did everybody else I spent time with, and they couldn't. I was responsible for my own choices just as this guy was. And it's like, well, you know I've made some difference in him, maybe not enough for him to gain the change that he wanted to do, but I know I didn't hinder him. And that was enough for me. I reflected on that and I figured out, I can't be responsible for these people after the choice.
Yeah, it's their responsibility from there. And like you said, you didn't hinder him.
It's like people say all the time, don't they? Like when somebody dies, what more could I have done? Nothing. Did they know you loved them? That was the one thing for me. I knew that, because I remember a couple of years ago, I got my dad round to my flat, and like we've never really had a relationship like that. I mean, he was more of a mate than a dad, but he's a lovely bloke, and he's there for me now, and he's never really let me down when I've asked him for anything. He's quite dependable.
Yeah.
But I can only remember like a couple of times where we hugged each other and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's not one of them. He's a man's man. But I knew that I didn't want, because I'm conscious of his mortality, I knew I didn't want him to go without knowing a few things. And he come round to my flat one day. It's so funny. I've gone, Dad, I really need to talk to you. I'd battled it a couple of times. I really wanted him to know, but I was so scared of telling him. For some reason, like, shut up, your girl, or whatever he say. I don't give a shit. I'm telling you now. And I've just said, Dad, I need you to know, I just need to tell you something. I love you, I respect you, and I want to thank you for not throwing my past in my face. And I got it out, and he got so uncomfortable, it was funny. He stood up quick, and, like, he's not great on his leg, but he stood up so fast and just muttered under his breath as he's going to the toilet. We've all got a past, don't we? And then come back out talking about my pink toilet water, because I've got one of them drops.
Yeah.
Well, it was that, at that point, I just felt, I knew it had been said.
Was that the right thing to do for you?
Yeah, I felt it, because that's the biggest regret I hear from people when they lose somebody close to them. I wish I'd said that. And I thought, well, I'm going to learn something from that then.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As uncomfortable as it was, me plucking up the courage to tell him, and as uncomfortable as I made him in the telling, do you know what I mean? So,
with the advice to parents, you said there was a lot of people that tried to stop you from taking smack and obviously going to prison. A lot of parents will beat themselves up and say, what more could I do? Educate.
Explore. You know, it's. I know that whether indirectly or directly, because I'm conscious that if I make it sound directly, that it's going to sound like I'm blaming my mum, which I'm not. But directly or indirectly, I felt limited in the choices I was allowed to make as a kid. Some of them justified, some of them not. Who knows now? You know. But it was, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I wasn't educated about the things that I wanted to do because they seemed exciting, and that was enough for me. I didn't know about consequences. But then it's like emotional support is, you know, because like people will take the piss out of people for, oh, you wimp, suck it up or whatever, this man up stuff. If you're feeling pain, you're feeling pain, and that should be comforted and respected for what it is. No, nobody's here that is nobody on this planet is the final arbiter of what's painful and what's not. Nobody, and everybody wants to go around like it is. And then, well, if I can't share my pain with people, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to internalise it. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to be disconnected. That's going to contribute. So you know what? If your kid wants to cry, let them cry, rather than just give them something to cry about.
Yeah. Listen to them a bit more. If you had one piece of advice that you wish you knew when you was a younger person, but you know now, it's a tricky one, but what would you pass on? What would you say?
Be yourself.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Allow yourself to be who you want to be.
Yeah.
Without consequence of thinking about what other people are going to say to you.
Yeah, well, their opinion don't matter. I have to live with me.
Yeah.
I've had to live with me for 24 hours of every day since I've been alive. There's nobody else I'm going to spend more time with if I don't like me.
Yeah. Who's going to like you? You've got to learn to love yourself. That's a beautiful and pretty simplistic piece of advice. I want to say thank you today for coming around and dropping that knowledge. And I hope a lot of the things that you've put out there will connect with people. A lot of what you said has connected with me, and I can see how it can be applied to my childhood or how I feel about certain topics. So I think it's quite relative to a lot of people out there. But brilliant. When's your next comedy event?
Oh, dear. When are we? Oh, it's this Friday. I'm emceeing in Newstead.
Newstead
Yeah.
Village?
Yeah.
Real. I might come along.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for today.
Nice one.
Cheers to that, mate.
Cheers.